right.
Album 5 of 6, Matt. What are we covering?
So we're doing New Order again. So this is our first repeat artist of the evening, and this is their album Technique.
Well, Wire was technically a repeat.
Oh, right, yes, as far as the
Well,
albums
yeah,
go.
yeah.
Yeah. So Technique comes in at number 114 in the 1980s on Best Ever Albums, number 11 in 1989, number 757 of all time. It's New Order's fourth highest rated album on Best Ever Albums, behind Power, Corruption, and Lies, which we covered, Low Life, which we also covered, and Substance, which we did not cover. That's actually a compilation record.
Oh, right.
That's where we did True Faith last week. That was a buzz clip, so that True Faith was on Substance. So Technique is not on Rolling Stone's list, and New Order's ranked number 126 of overall artist rankings on Best Ever Albums. And yeah, guys, I'm still very much in the New Order camp. I like this record. And I was trying to figure out, all right, of the New Order albums that we've covered, what's my ranking? And I can't do it. I don't. Yeah. I think they're all kind of solidly like. My reactions to them are very similar. I think, interestingly enough, with the previous two records, with Power, Corruption, Lies, and Low Life, I thought both of those records started off with really great opening tracks, and I think the opening track here might be my least favorite on the record. It's kind of like, yeah. When I first heard it, I was like, oh man, they're really going hard into the dance, and they've been basically doing dance type, club type music, really since they started, right? And Joy Division disbanded, But I think that they kind of reel that in. I think that's kind of like the most club-like, or that song's most likely to be one that would be played at like a rave or something like that, kind of like more of a heavier dance song. But I continue to say I love Peter Hook's bass lines. I mean, he's just got really, it's an interesting, marriage of like kind of like a pop bass rock kind of genre along with dance music, although I would still say this is kind of more in the pop dance music rather than rock, but the bass really kind of does ground a lot of these songs in, and occasionally guitar. Like there's I think Dream Attack's got a really cool guitar part. Maybe Love Less, is that the other one? I can't remember offhand, but there's a couple of moments on this record where there's like a really good guitar part that kind of helps ground it down in a little bit more of a traditionally rock structure. So I just love that vibe that they have, and they don't really, New Order's not really changing their sound a whole lot, from record to record, and so I guess you could say maybe eventually that could be considered a knock against them, because maybe if the better artists are ones that kind of, we were just praising Terrence Trent D'Arby for, marrying a bunch of things together and kind of going in different directions and never boring you, but this kind of like, picks a lane and it stays in it. It's just a lane that I happen to really enjoy. I like the synthetic, it's not techno necessarily, but it's definitely electronic music. There's a lot of melody in here, and I, like I said, I really think the bass is the strongest part of that really just kind of grounds everything. Bernard Sumner's voice is not that great. It's fine, right? It's probably, they probably could stand to have a more charismatic or or energetic vocalist a little bit, but at the same time it's kind of their vibe a little bit is to kind of be a little mopey and a little sad bastardy. So
I mean, their music kind of provides the energy, I guess, in some ways.
Yeah. So the vocals become a little secondary, which is I'm okay with, because I think that the music is strong enough to kind of carry that. I just think it probably could go a little bit up. Like you could. That doesn't mean you don't have to have a great singer. It just you don't need to have it, because there's other things that kind of, that for me at least, that my focus goes in a different direction. But yeah, I thought. It's solid. It's New Order's, and with New Order and Joy Division, the combination of those two. I mean, if I think about the overall run of this podcast, I think this is one of my favorite finds that for me is pretty consistent. That I really just I enjoy the vibe. I kind of like the melody with the melancholy. I think the marriage of those two things, are the minor keys and stuff like that. It really works for me. So yeah, thumbs up for me again on another New Order record.
So Matt, were we listening to the same album? Because this is a completely different album than the rest of New Order's catalog. And it's by far my favorite New Order album by tons. And I think it sounds extraordinarily different than the other New Order albums. There's nothing about this which seems melancholy to me. This seems almost like house music at times. Like it's very much designed to. And I know I famously joked around like, who's dancing to this New Order stuff? Like this album, there's no question about it. Like, what are you dancing to? There's 4 or 5 tracks on here that are like straight ahead, like straight up frantic dance music. There's still songs like Guilty Partner, right, which sort of veer in the lane of what New Order's been doing, but I can't personally, I can't disagree enough with like they're staying in the same lane, doing their same, like I feel this is a very different album, and it like immediately popped to me because I knew none of the songs on this album, and like all the other ones I had a bunch of songs, but boy, I was like, man, these are all the songs that I wanted to hear from New Order. Like songs like Round and Round, right, and Fine Time and stuff were straight ahead, like dance club dance music, not just like the goths like to get out and dance every once in a while. This is like you go to like, and it's funny because I did a little research after that, and they like literally tape this in Ibiza, which all I think of is like all night parties. You know what I mean? And it's like, well, yeah, that's what this album sounds like. It's basically like an album for like an all night party in many ways. And I was much more drawn to this sound with New Order. It was much more inviting to me. New Order has always sort of worn me down a little bit. I found it to be, after a while, it's like I kind of get what they're going for, right? And just there was always a distance to me. And unlike say Joy Division, where the distance was intriguing because there's stuff, New Order just seemed double combination of the morose but also the very clinical. This album was not. This album, I was like, I want to listen to more of this, and both times I listened to it, it really appealed to me. I mean, their lyrics are still horrible; they're about nothing, but you're not listening to an album like this, in my opinion, for lyrics. Like they're secondary compared to, the danceability and I can't stress enough how much this far supersedes, in my opinion, the other New Order albums, which I was much more lukewarm on. And if this had been the New Order I was more familiar with, I think I would have been talking them up quite a bit. So this one gets something that I did not think that was going to be coming from me for a New Order album, which is a pretty confident and strong thumbs up.
Yeah, I think I'm gonna kind of split the difference, I think, on your guys' opinions. I think we're splitting hairs in some ways, because I see what Matt's talking about. I think it's a kind of a variation by degrees. They're still really just electronic based synth music, and I think they've always
the synths are way stronger on this album than they were in the other ones, in my opinion. Like, way stronger.
I guess so. I feel like this is all their albums I felt like I could dance to. I feel like this one's not any different.
But you don't feel like I felt like there wasn't a lot of guitar on this album. There were still bass lines, but it was, the other albums were basically all bass and all drum and guitar lines, whereas this was very synth heavy, in my opinion.
Yeah, I guess I haven't picked up on that. This is
I
don't know. They've been synths from the get-go. Yeah.
And the bass has always been there as well. And that's what I'm saying. Like it's been the complement of both the synth and it's the way that the bass is being played, which is it's still more in a rock-based sound, but it complements the synths
have
pretty
always
well.
been there, but the synths were complementary on the other albums. On this album, they're the lead instrument on nearly every album, and the guitars and even the bass line were there, but they didn't play like the other albums. To me, the bass lines and the drums played the lead by even the vocals at times, and the synths sort of rounded out the edges. This album is synth, right, and everything else is sort of behind it. So
yeah, this is, to be fair, I think this is the album I wanted to listen to again or process more. I felt like this was really trying to capitalize or sound like The Cure in a lot of ways, especially on a song like All the Way, to the point where I was like, are they just ripping off The Cure? Because the more I listened to this album, the more I just wanted to listen to The Cure instead. So I don't know what that says.
Really?
Yeah.
I didn't get any Cure from this album. That's so wow. I feel like I
Yeah,
listened to a
on
different
that
album
song,
than you guys.
that song is definitely yeah.
There's one.
That song's
yeah,
actually
yeah.
that song is actually probably less synth than because that's very guitar bass driven. And I don't know. I think I would encourage you to go back to those other records. That I remember them being pretty synth heavy as well. I don't think that
once
this
again,
is an aberration.
synths were there, but the production, I completely hear this different than you guys. This sounded like a completely different band in different ways to me than the earlier New Order in terms of how they ordered their music and what they were going for here. Yeah.
Do you feel like it was I don't know, more inviting or warm or something? That
Absolutely. I mean, this album was designed to like bring people together to dance. I felt like the other New Order albums were very much about a personal experience that was sort of, I guess a good way to put it would be like the other album was designed to be processed like by yourself in some ways, whereas this album's like for the world, kind of would be a way I'd describe it. And I just the musical order, yes. I know we keep doing this. It's not that the synths weren't always in New Order. They always were. But they're produced and they're stacked just so different in this album compared to the other ones that they seem like a completely different band. And like it's just such a different type of dance music. It's much more like in the club party music than the other music, which I felt was still very much rooted to like that post-punk sound. This seems very detached from post-punk to me and much more tied into like modern dance music and what would be coming in the 90s with like techno and acid stuff and house and all that stuff.
Yeah.
So to me,
I guess even the cover kind of evokes that in some ways. It's a bit more psychedelic or trippier, or I don't know, like if leaning into that rave maybe upcoming.
I feel like they took a shit ton of drugs before this album. They probably were taking a lot, but they were taking like GHB type drugs for this, right? As opposed to maybe what they were taking before. Like this doesn't feel like a heroin album, right? Like the Joy Division and early New Order do. This feels like a club drugs album.
Yeah. So I mean that all being said, I enjoyed the album. I didn't recognize any of the tracks off of it. It's amazing how I know we've talked about New Order before, but I think a lot of the songs I know are their singles, and we haven't those haven't really been on the albums that we've talked about. So I wasn't really familiar with this one. Last week we talked about True Faith, which I had heard before, I think, and I don't know. I feel like that song in some ways sounds similar to this to me, but
I had to jump in here because I'm like, am I going nuts so I'm reading the review. The review of this album is the ecstasy fueled house music that influences New Order's technique. Okay, so I'm not nuts. Like other people heard what I was hearing because I was starting to think I was going insane with a little bit of what I was hearing there. So I'm not saying I'm right, but I'm like, all right, at least other people are hearing this too. Marked a marked departure from their previous sound is the second lyric in here. Okay. Second line, excuse me. So, all right, I'll back up for a second, but I had to. Okay.
Well, maybe then I need to listen to their previous album in this back to back to pick up on that because I didn't hear that. And but yeah, this is enjoyable. I didn't have anything really new to add. Like Matt said, I think Matt's kind of the highest on New Order, but I also have kind of always enjoyed their sound and always responded to the way they use their synths, and I haven't really ever found them clinical. And probably on more listens of this album, I would hopefully pick up on what John's talking about in the ecstasy and in the agony and all of that. And so yeah, thumbs up for me. New Order does it again.
Can I read this review? Because I'm laughing because it literally. So here's the review, the one paragraph review from AllMusic. Just not saying I'm right, but I have to. So tastes and sounds were changing in the late 80s, which prompted New Order's most startling transformation yet, from moody dance rockers to moody acid house techno mavens. After the band booked a studio on the island hotspot of Ibiza, apparently not knowing it was the center of the burgeoning house music craze, New Order's instincts for blending rock and contemporary dance resulted in another superb LP. Technique was the group's most striking production job, with the single Fine Time being the most extroverted dance track in the band's catalog. Opening the record is a portrait of a group unrecognizable from its origin or other albums, delivering lascivious and extroverted come-ons amid pounding beats. It appeared that the dance and the synthesizers had fully taken over from the guitar and bass layering of the early albums. That's where it ends. I'm like, okay, fucking at least someone else, I think, heard what I heard right here, because I was like, it's really weird to me, because it seems like I never in a million years wouldn't have thought that you guys wouldn't have heard this completely differently. So once again, not saying I'm right.
It's
but, yeah.
more of a, it's more of a. There is more of like a dance element, but I don't think a marked departure. I take issue with that. I think that's a. It's like that makes it sound like they just decided to totally scrap everything that they were doing and then like go in a totally different genre. And
so let me give you an example. So like on Round and Round, okay, where do you hear the guitars that were all over the other New Order albums? Because that is literally
first of all, I take issue
bass.
with the fact I take issue with the assumption that there's guitars all over any of the New Order albums that we've covered already. I don't think that's true. I think there's guitars in there. I think there's.
In Low Life, you didn't hear the guitars all over.
I heard
that
guitars,
album.
but I don't. But there's still. To me, they've always been a synth-based band. Like there's guitars and bass that complement it, but I don't hear them as being guitars all over. There's songs that have more guitars than others, but I don't
there's
think
songs
that
like
it's
that
like
Elegia, right, from Low Life, that's all synth. So like they had songs that were like that, but
they had plenty of dance songs that were happening before. This might be a little bit more up, like a faster beat, like a more upbeat thing. But I don't know. I don't. I mean, I have to go back and listen to the other ones, but I don't remember them being like, man, this is a guitar-driven band. I've never thought that about New Order.
In fairness, it's not that it was a guitar-driven. That's a fair point, Matt.
Well, that's what we're talking about, though.
I think I'm just thinking of but I'll cede you that point. But I also think you're very much underplaying the marked change in the production and the use of synths.
And maybe, so maybe
different.
I need to go back and listen to the other ones and like back to back to back, and maybe I would see it a little bit differently. But yeah. I don't know. I guess I'm just saying I would be surprised if I went back and I was like, wow, this is a step in a different direction. Now there's some advancement, but it doesn't. But they're still, to me, they're occupying a very similar lane than they were before, and there's some deviation there. But I don't know. It's just different ways that we're hearing it. To me, it's not this stark difference. I've loved all of their records. That I still feel like that. Yes.
Let me give you an example. Age of Consent from Power, Corruption, and Lies. Yeah. You're telling me they're not a guitar band, okay? But you know that song. It starts off with a guitar line right off the beat.
Yes.
Like it's literally a guitar riff from the beginning, and the synths are flowing. But so, like you said, I need to like listen like that right off the bat. First song on the first New Order album we covered is a completely different sound than what this is. So like that's kind of what I'm getting at. Like that is a guitar-heavy song.
All the Way is the song that Josh was talking about. That's the same guitars. It's actually the bass, if I'm not mistaken. That's Peter Hook's bass played high on the fret, and that's a similar kind of thing that's happening in a song like All the Way, which is the song that Josh was like, that sound, and I thought too, and actually Sherry said that today. Is this The Cure? That it's got a very Cure-like kind of sound to it. So it's there too, in this record.
I think it's just they're doing different drugs. It's all drugs. They're just doing different drugs. So now this sounds different as a result. I don't know. I think we're splitting hairs. I'm glad you heard it differently, John, and you like New Order now. But like, I
wouldn't say I like their entire catalog. I like this album quite a bit.
I have to go back and listen to them back to back in order to pick up on that, because I don't even think of it. Honestly, I don't even think of a New Order band as like a guitar band. I couldn't tell you. Like,
well, I wouldn't say they're. Well, yeah, we're losing the lead a little, because I don't think of them as a guitar band, but it's just.
I know.
I think we're either going to hear it when I'm not going to tell you to go back and listen to them, and I'm not even going to say that in going back and listening to them, you're even going to necessarily hear it the way I do, nor would I want you to just force like my opinion on you. But I mean, it was so obvious to me, and then I went back and listened later just to check myself, and it's like, oh yeah, like this.
Well, I definitely go back. I could definitely go back and listen to those other records. I love New Order, so it's not like, and so it's like, okay, yeah, maybe I need to give it another shot.
Especially Power, Corruption, and Lies. It's a very different album than that one.
Yeah.
So.
Oh yeah. I would say so. I mean, they're coming off the death of the other guy and everything. So, but
Ian Curtis. Yeah.
yes, Ian Curtis. Thank you. And so yeah, I mean, I think there's definitely an evolution. They're a band that we've covered the entire '80s. So right from 80 in fact to 89, they've trained.
Their first album we did not cover, from 81. It's called Movement.
Okay.
But then we did Power Corruption Lies 83, Low Life was 85, and this is 89.
And we did
there was 86. Brotherhood
Club.
was in 86. There was an album that we did not cover that was in between.
And we did a track from the 87 album, right,
Yes.
in our Buzz Clip journey as
Right.
well. So,
The Substance,
listeners, weigh in. Either take a side on our debate or tell us why we're both right or both wrong, and give us your take. Like, how do you, especially if you're a New Order fan or someone who loves them, like, tell us where you stand. Like, how should we couch this album, since it's the most spirited debate we've had in a while on an album. Yes. So we're agreeing with each other too much this episode, so we need to go a different direction.
What drugs go best with this album? Let me know.
I think there's only one answer to that, and it's clearly like ecstasy.
Ibiza.
Like, can we all agree on that this is the New Order's ecstasy album? Because I think that's pretty clear. Yeah. Matt, will you cede that point to me, that this is the ecstasy album of New Order?
This is more of a Ludes album for me.
Although they did have a song called Ecstasy on Power, Corruption, and Lies, so that's so maybe Okay.
I will say I think this is more. I think it's probably a faster, like more up tempo, upbeat type record than maybe the previous ones. But when I hear them at the core, I'm hearing there's more similarities than there are differences. I guess that's the abridged version of my take.
That's what I'm saying too.
I think I was just triggered by the fact that you said all of these kind of could stand together, and I'm like, these two do not all blend together for me. This one blends very differently. So so that was, I think, what triggered me at the beginning. So
good stuff.
And then it was one of those things you said at the beginning. I'm like, I'd like to counter this point, but I want to be polite to Matt. But then it kept going longer, and I'm like, all right, I need Matt to stop so I can come in and challenge this narrative. So I think I got more fired up. So